they're housed actually at Whitney Storage, where all of our artwork is stored, and that's on the far west side at around 23rd Street. So we really are kind of scattered to the winds at the moment.
In terms of your visitors, though, there's really just one building for them to come to.
Exactly.
And you don't have a sculpture garden or any outdoor space?
Actually, there's a sort of sunken courtyard at the front of the Whitney, half of which is currently taken up by our art making studio, because we lost all of that space when our office building was sold. So yeah, there might be now one sculpture in the sculpture court at any given time, and that's it.
And
So yeah,
how many visitors do you get a year? Do you know?
yeah, it's around the 2 million mark at the moment, and we're expecting it to expand quite a bit when we move, with all the tourists off the High Line and our downtown location.
And what do you know about their makeup in terms of who's coming to visit you, age, demographics, interests, that kind of thing?
So majority of our visitors are actually people who live here, and they're between the sort of 20 to 45 range. And we do get a certain number of tourists from out of town. I don't know exactly the percentage, but not as many as, say, the Met or MoMA or even the Guggenheim. We're sort of the small kid on the block, and not so many people are familiar with the Whitney as the Met or MoMA.
And do you know what percentage of your visitors are foreigners?
Um, it's not as high as you would expect. Um, I think it's about 15% from the figures that I can remember that I've last seen.
Okay. And I wonder if just my last question to you before I'll hand over to Dixie for the kind of questions about your program. Actually, two last questions. One, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about um, the studies that the Whitney has done over the years about mobile in your museum, and then maybe just kind of give us an overview of the different kinds of mobile programs you've had over the years. So in whatever order makes sense for you.
Okay. Um, Maybe I'll do the programs first and then the studies. So we began doing audio guides around 1995 with the Beat Culture in New America exhibition. And at that time, we were working with Acoustic Guide. So it was with those sort of wands. And we did sort of interviews with Allen Ginsberg and some of the beat poets, writers, and artists who were still alive at that time. We then didn't really do much audio until the American Century exhibition in 1999-2000. And for that, we had funding to create an entire sort of collection tour. There were many collection pieces in that exhibition, and it was called American Voices. And we had that in 3 different languages as well as English. It was Spanish, Japanese, and German, I believe. And we did a director's tour for that. So it was quite sort of an ambitious project to begin with. We then kind of scaled back and did collection exhibitions and some special exhibitions. And we usually have probably about between 20 and 25 audio stops in an audio guide. And it was just a straight audio guide. And we we're still leasing players from Antenna now, and sort of building up to the current situation. We just sort of rented players as Antenna's technology changed, and they were all sort of push-button audio guides that you'd use with a pair of headphones. Then in October, in the summer of 2011, actually, Antenna said, we have this new content management system, and we're switching to the smartphone app delivery. And do you want to do this? And so we said, well, okay, if we can produce our own content, then you can put it into your CMS and upload it for us. And that was the point at which we switched to an iPod Touch. So that's what we currently use, and that allows us now to put video as well as audio, and to just sort of expand on the possibilities for not only multimedia but also accessibility features as well. Closed captioning for videos, and transcripts in different text font sizes. As far as some of the really fun projects that we've done, primarily in conjunction and in collaboration with our digital media curator, Christian Paul. One of those projects was an artist project by James Buckhouse, and he designed these two little figures for a Palm Pilot, and whoever had a Palm Pilot of their own could come to the museum, beam these figures or put them on their own device at a sort of docking station, and go into the galleries and sort of look at people's movements and design little dance sequences really with these figures. And all of these sequences were then put on a website for everybody to see what people had done with it. And other projects that we've done have been more, our teen program actually did something called Talk and Text, and they gave some information for people's smartphones, and you could listen, and then you could respond back by text messaging. And that was sort of very successful project as well. And the teens kind of kicked it off by having an event with teens where they would talk and text, and so that worked out pretty well. So those are the two of the more sort of artist-driven, innovative projects that we've done.
And just out of curiosity, have you also worked with cell phone tours?
Yeah, that was actually a cell phone tour, the talk and text.
Right, okay.
So any teenager with a cell phone could engage, and in fact any adult could text as well. So
Okay, cool.
yeah, those are two of the more interesting projects that we've done outside of the traditional audio tour.
Are either of those described in any of the studies that you've done of mobile, or in other publications that we might refer back to?
No, I can probably send you some information about it, though.
Okay. Well, if it's okay with you to make it public, we can put it on our blog, or I can also obviously link over to the reports that you put on the Museum Mobile Wiki.
Okay.
Or wherever you link.
Yeah.
So, how many devices do you have in the gallery to hand out to people, to visitors now?
For a regular sort of collection or temporary exhibition, we usually lease 200 devices from Antenna. And then for an exhibition like the Biennial, which is on all floors of the museum, and we'll have many more audio stops, so like 50 audio stops or however many artists actually want to contribute. Then we have 300 players. Places like the Guggenheim and the Met have 800 players. We've been doing a little research into this recently because when we move to the new building, we're hoping to buy a fleet of players and just sort of rent them ourselves rather than leasing from Antenna, which is kind of expensive.
And would you staff the distribution yourselves as well in the new site, or do you already, is it your staff or Antenna staff who are handing out the devices?
It's Whitney staff, and actually it's through our Visitors Services department. They have a core of volunteers that they train to hand out the devices. An Antenna comes in when we have a sort of brand new app and there's something different on it for each group of exhibitions. We bring in Antenna and they sort of walk the volunteers through how to use it and how to show visitors as well, troubleshooting, stuff like that. The volunteers have a written manual as well that explains every step of the procedure as well, handing out players. We also hand out headphones, and they get cleaned each time a person hands them back as well. So we have a sort of 300 players under the lobby counter, and there's enough power to sort of charge all of those as well. Then we have a kind of staging area where the volunteers prepare the players to give to visitors and then prepare to receive them back from visitors. We hang our headphones on a rack, for example. Not very pretty, but it sort of is the only thing we can do right now in the space that we have. We're looking into getting more like sort of airplane headphones, disposable headphones that people can just sort of take away with them for the new building. But we're not absolutely sure about that yet. We may have to just recycle headphones as well. And I've heard from other colleagues that headphones pose some of the sort of biggest problems. Not having enough, breaking, things like that. So we're really still playing around with what we're going to do about headphones in the future.
Are people bringing their own?
Yes, and they can certainly use their own with our devices. We right now we give the devices out for free, but to recoup the cost of buying them ourselves, we're probably going to have to rent them for $5 or something in the new building. So the options there will be, okay, download the app on your own player and use your own device, or if you're a tourist and you don't want your phone battery to wear down or use up your internet allowance, then you can rent one from us for $5 with the app already uploaded.
I think that might be a good moment to hand over to Dixie and go through the questions that people had, because you've already answered. I've started to answer some of them, so we'll just run down the list. The first one is someone was wondering how you dealt with collecting personally identifiable information.
Okay. So we collect any form of picture ID except for passports and credit cards. That could be a driver's license, government-issued IDs. It could be a Whitney membership card. So for students, it would be current and valid student ID, which would have a picture on it. And there are absolutely sort of no passports, no credit cards, no exceptions to that. And Nancy, you brought up an interesting question about the legality of or privacy issues, taking people's driver's licenses and things like that. And I've actually shot an email off to our legal counsel to find out the answer to those questions.
What do you do if someone doesn't have an ID, or has that ever happened? Something to give you?
We apologize profusely and say, sorry, we can't give out the players unless you can give us an ID. We have both our audio and our video on the website as well, so they could get an internet connection in the museum lobby and download the audio, and even at a pinch listen to it in the galleries if not too many people are doing the same thing. As I mentioned in my Museums and Web presentation, the Whitney has granite walls, so we have tremendous issues right now with Wi-Fi, and what we don't want to happen is for people to try to download the stuff on their own devices and have a really frustrating experience because the Whitney's Wi-Fi is intermittent or it isn't working. Our IT department has tried to put routers in the galleries as best they can, because often artists are going to ask for Wi-Fi for particular pieces that they're showing in an exhibition, but still it's not completely consistent. I mean, for example, Corey Archangel, in his solo exhibition about a year or two ago, he had one gallery completely routed for Wi-Fi, and anybody could go there and check their email and do anything on their handheld device. And that part of the gallery is probably still functioning, but there are also some security concerns. So there's a login for our Wi-Fi in the lobby. It's a little clunky at the moment, and hoping that it's going to be a lot smoother when we move to the new building. It won't be an issue, but right now we're sort of a bit challenged as far as Wi-Fi goes.
Sorry, Dina, just to go back to the collecting of people's picture IDs.
Yeah.
When they hand over their ID to your staff member, what happens next? What does your staff member do with that ID?
Okay. We have a box. It looks like one of those old-fashioned index card boxes, just a black box from Staples, with alphabet index cards in it. They file it under last name and hand over the player. And then when the person returns the player, they get their ID back.
Do you give a receipt? Do you give a receipt for the ID or anything, a piece of paper, or is it just simply that you know that as soon as they bring back that device and tell you their name, then you're going to give them an ID, and of course I guess you can check it's the right person because there's a picture on it.
Picture and then, yeah.
So no receipts.
So actually, no, we don't do receipts. It's a good idea, though.
I've seen it done in various places, and to be honest with you, I'm not sure what the advantage or disadvantage is. But anyway, I think it's more common not to give a receipt than to give a receipt.
Yeah. And a lot of these things have been, we sort of work quite closely with antenna audio, and a lot of these things are sort of just things learned over the years, and they probably recommended us to do it that way. I haven't always been involved with interpretation, but I've been sometimes a content provider as well as the sort of manager of interpretive media. So, yeah, each time we have a sort of question like, oh, how many players does the Met have, or how many does the Guggenheim give out? It'll take a little while, but Antenna, the manager there, will get back to me and give me a series of figures and information just to keep us informed and sort of to be able to make informed decisions about our own players and how many we provide.
And I'm just trying to remember from my last visit to the Whitney, is the lanyard that the device is on kind of brightly colored so that maybe provides, there you go, orange. So if your security guards at the door see somebody walking out with one of those around their neck or hanging out of their pocket, they can kind of maybe more easily spot it and say, oh, excuse me, did you forget to return your device?
Exactly. Another thing that we do to sort of deter people from leaving the museum with a player, so we put a security tag on the lanyard as well. It's completely fake. It doesn't actually do anything, but it's a deterrent. And again, we're sort of thinking, well, should we have these security tags on our own generation of iPods? But we probably won't, because it's completely fake.
Right. I think you told me you haven't lost any iPod touches, but what about breakage or damage?
Okay, so I've got this silly warning thing here on my, let me see if I can, there it is. Okay, so the iPod Touch is encased in these plastic cases, and it actually goes in upside down, so it's in there like this.
Can you pull your hand back and higher?
Okay.
There we go. Yeah, that's
it. The player is in there like that. Can you see it?
If you kind of pull back and up, we can see it really well. Yeah.
Okay. Right. And it hides this button here, so you can't actually press anything or go to the internet and do what you want to do. It's completely barred from the visitor doing that. It gets very difficult to sort of switch the players on and off because you actually have to use a ballpoint pen. But it's certainly secure. And it also protects the player in case people drop the players. The lanyard really helps with that, and our volunteers really encourage people to wear them around the neck so they don't drop them. So the players, if they do break or whatever, we put the broken ones aside, and then Antenna comes and does they're supposed to come weekly, but I think they come bi-weekly maintenance to pick up the broken players and fix them and bring them back.
What are the most common kinds of breakage that happen?
I think from people dropping them. But so far, Robert, our guy at Antenna, seems to have been able to fix them all as well. I do have to tell you that there was a time when we weren't taking people's IDs, and that was when we lost a few players. So we reinstated taking people's IDs, and that was maybe well over a year ago. We haven't lost any since.
So that was iPod Touches. You stopped taking IDs and it was iPod Touches that disappeared?
Yeah, and we have to pay Antenna probably about twice as much as they're actually worth to replace them. So we thought we'd better, reinstate taking IDs again. And it's totally worked really well.
Can I ask how often you have ones break? So do you usually have one every few weeks, or do you have 15 every few weeks that end up?
I would say about 2 or 3 out of 200 per week.
Thank you.
So, usually either Robert takes those 3, his office is at the Met, so he's not that far away. He fixes them and brings them back. Or he waits 2 weeks and visitor services are emailing him saying, hey, Robert, we have a bunch of broken players, and then he'll take the 6 or whatever. But it's not high volume breakage or anything like that. If we transfer to buying our own, what we're thinking of is actually hiring an individual to do the maintenance, because basically if you're not Antenna Audio, you're going to take them to Apple to fix. So we were going to find someone to whom we could pay a monthly retainer fee and then get them fixed that way.
Do you know how many times your devices get used each day?
They do take, we do do statistics on that, and our take-up is, I know it's only about 7% of an entire exhibition audience, and it really varies from day to day. If it's a really popular exhibition, for example, like our upcoming Edward Hopper drawing exhibition, then the players are going to be taken much more. For the biennial, because so many more people come to that than any other Whitney exhibition, the take-up is actually a little better. But these days, it hovers around 7%.
But do you think that your 200 players go out more than once a day, each of them, on average?
Yeah, I would definitely say there have been times, take the sort of busy scenario, which the Smithsonian probably has all the time. For the biennial, the 300 players can be entirely out. And we're saying, oh, we wish we had 10 more, because there are 10 people here who have to wait until some players come back.
And they're free now to use, right?
We hand them out for free, yeah.
But you pay to get into the museum.
Yes. Yeah. And we're hoping we can still, while we're leasing them from Antenna, we will still hand out those players for free until people can actually download the app to their own device. Then we won't be renting out players for people who can't do that.
Do you know about who is borrowing the devices? Is it younger people? Is it older people? Is it a mix?
From what I've observed, it's an entire range. For the past biennial in 2012, we actually had some kids stops on the player, and so we advertise that through signage in the lobby and on other printed material and on the website. And I saw, families and kids taking the guide as well as adults. Since then, we haven't offered kids anything, so I haven't seen so many kids taking the devices. But I would say that it really depends on what kind of visitor they are more than their age, I think. I would say the older crowd who aren't used to the smartphones have a much harder time and have to be sort of more guided by our volunteers. I forgot to mention that we also do a training with our museum guards so that they know how the devices work. So if anyone comes up to them in the galleries and they're having trouble with the device, the guards also know, oh, that's how you switch the app back on, and there you go, so they can help out as well.
So you do train your volunteers to teach the visitors how to use the devices in the tours as well?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear the question.
So you train your volunteers on how to teach the people to use the devices as well?
Absolutely, yes. We show them everything that's on the device and where the menu is and what's in the particular sections of the menu. And we've been going through some iterations recently. I think the dust has settled for a while because we have this sort of what we describe as a workhorse app where exhibitions, it's swapped out. Once an exhibition closes, that exhibition comes off the app and we have different uploads. But the navigation of the app these days is going to pretty much stay as it is for a while, I think. So it's kind of, the volunteers over time get used to it and actually quite enjoy showing people where things are on the player. They're always interested in when we have a new exhibition or whether we have slideshows and video and other things besides audio.
Technical question. What about battery management? What do you do to manage the battery?
The batteries are not too bad, actually, and probably last between like 4 to 5 hours, which is pretty much the whole day, the time that the museum is open. So when somebody returns a player, the volunteers put it straight back in its charger under the desk, and then they have a fleet of fully charged ones ready to hand out. So we actually haven't had a lot of issues with battery.
So do you keep
Carlos,
them
did you have
connected?
a question?
Yeah, I wanted to know if they keep them connected all night, or
Yes, we do.
You do. And have you noticed any after, let's say a year or something, has the battery, is it losing, its capacity or something like that?
I am pretty sure that it would lose capacity. Antenna really takes care of that end of it.
They would just replace any.
But yeah, just from my own iPhone, they have battery issues. Yeah.
I'm just wondering, we're going to have an exhibition where we'll be having iPads, but they're fixed. We're not really actually giving them to the public, and they're going to be plugged 24/7. And Apple says that it's best if you discharge your devices.
Yeah. Yeah.
After
So how long is the exhibition on view?
Probably 5 to 6 months, I think. So.
I think you'll be okay, but that player might not be 100% at the end of those 6 months. Are you purchasing players or renting them?
We are purchasing a set of iPads. I don't know how many, but they're also going to be. Yeah, they're also going to be on. I mean, the screen is going to have a screensaver, I believe, but they're going to be also always showing something. So we don't know about screen live.
In my experience, the iPad battery is a whole lot better than the iPod Touch or the phone. So, yeah, I think keeping anything plugged in, because Apple recommends that you switch off your computers as well at night.
Right.
I think keeping anything plugged in is going to wear down the life of the battery, but on the optimistic side, the iPads seem to be able to, the battery doesn't drain as fast, and it seems to, if you keep everything else switched off, except the thing you're actually using, I think should be fine. How many are you purchasing?
I think there's going to be 4 or 5. I'm not pretty sure. But, our museum has this control for all the devices and artwork and everything to turn on a schedule. But I don't know if they're going to be able to put those in the schedule or not.
I don't know. I mean, if the electricity is shut down altogether, then somebody will actually have to go switch those on, I think. The other thing we do with our other sort of equipment that we do purchase, and we have a couple of iPads and a fleet of Mac Air computers for our different programs. And we always get Apple Care, and that lasts for 2 years. And supposedly under Apple Care, you get free service and maintenance from Apple. So
yeah, we do it too. We usually get Apple Care with everything.
Yeah.
Because it's government, but that's a good point.
Yeah. So we just always buy it, and of course nothing happens until after the 2 years, but we always get it just in case of battery problems.
An overarching question was, how did you get the Whitney behind actually distributing devices to the public, and was there a debate within the museum, and how did you get them to agree to it?
You mean back in 1995, or? I think education was really had a very nice collaboration with curatorial at that time, and that it wasn't a problem to have to persuade curatorial that this was a good idea. And I think especially because it had some of the beat poets and artists' voice on the device, and that was a real sort of draw for people. And we kind of continued that with the biennial to have the curators as well as the artist's voice on there, not just a narrator or people outside of the museum. So there was real buy-in to have these devices there as something that visitors could enhance their visit with. As far as the audio desk goes and training people and having people distribute these things, it's sort of gone back and forth. I think at first Visitor Services hired someone to do that and then decided, oh, we don't really have this in our budget. So then they had the idea that, maybe some of the volunteers could do this. And I think that now, Wendy, our Visitor Services manager, she sort of handpicks the people most likely or most interested in doing this kind of work, so that it's never, even though you're a volunteer, it's never something that you're not interested in doing. And we're in education, and we were a bit concerned, well, can they really do this? But it seems to be very smooth, especially with the training that they're given. So.
And is that all that those volunteers do, the ones who hand out devices? Are they exclusively dedicated to that, or do they do other things too?
They're exclusively dedicated to that. So they have I think they do it in shifts as well. There's a sort of, 11 to 3 person and a 3 to 6 person or something like that. So they swap out, because I've often noticed, like, being up at the museum all day, and it'll be one person in the morning and then a different person in the afternoon. So it's kind of these sort of 3-hour blocks. And again, sometimes it's really, really busy, and then other times it can be slow, because that's the way our audiences work. I know at MoMA, they have at least 3 people at the desk, and they're always madly handing out and receiving players. There's always a line there.
But one person is enough to hand out 2 or even 300 devices at the Whitney?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, ideally, if we have a scansion and we set all that up, but I think ideally there could be 2 people there, so one person receiving and staging and another person handing out. I think that's a more ideal situation. But for our pace and purposes, we usually only need one person.
And just to go back to the question about whether there were concerns internally about handing out devices, did any new concerns surface when you moved from dedicated audio tour devices to commercially, kind of sexier new technologies like iPod?
Yeah. We were concerned because they were iPod Touches, but if people are familiar with them, they say, oh, this is an iPod Touch. We don't broadcast it. But if they're not familiar, they just know, oh, we touch this thing instead of pressing buttons, So, and also, the full confession here, I've tried to get one out of the case. It's really, really hard. The cases are so sturdy that even if you drop them, actually it acts as a protection for the device. But if you drop them, and we have, granite floors as well, bluestone floors, even if you drop them, the case doesn't break, and usually the iPod Touch doesn't break either. So the companies have figured out, how sturdy the cases need to be. And then we also needed the cases because they're the ones that fit in the antenna chargers. So the player actually sort of has to come with the case in order to go in the chargers. And similarly we're thinking about this company called Parrot Solutions that do a much neater kind of mobile charging station. And we have to buy their cases because they're the only ones that actually fit in their chargers.
And the chargers are just for charging the battery on the device, right?
Yeah.
How do you get new content onto the device?
There also, I think the chargers serve a purpose. So if I was just doing this, we were just doing this from the Whitney, we would actually have the content in a content management system, either on a website or on our own server. And we would connect that laptop to, say, 20 devices at a time and be able to upload the content to those devices. I haven't actually done this, but this is the way that I understand it is done. Do you know Emily Black-Fry at the Nelson Atkins Museum, Nancy?
Yes.
Yeah, she'd be a really good person to talk to about the uploads and everything, because they do have their own fleet of iPod Touches, and I think they do their own uploads as well.
Give her a shout then.
I've heard that it's a bit of a nightmare to upload the first time, but once you get used to it, it's pretty straightforward.
We've been experimenting with using iCloud.
Yeah.
And, we're more interested in kind of backing up the content so that if visitors add content that we don't want to be there or delete stuff using devices, that we can restore it to its initial state for the next user.
Yeah.
And that worked very well, and it was very easy.
Great. That's terrific.
Okay. So we've been through our pre-compiled list of questions and have a few minutes left in our hour. Are there any more questions from people who are on the call? No? Okay.
Okay.
Dina, you've just done an amazing job of summarizing. Okay. This is like a 101 to mobile device distribution in museums, and really, really helpful.
Okay.
I hope I have recorded this.
Okay.
So that those who couldn't join us online or in person can consult it later on, and certainly make that available to you as well in case it's helpful for your own purposes.
Terrific. I forgot to tell you about the evaluations that
oh,
we've
yeah,
done.
please, yeah.
We did a big one in 2008, which was to find out what people thought about using mobile devices in the museum. It wasn't a particular evaluation study of content or something that we had on a device, and we got some sort of surprising results at that time. This is a little bit before I was involved totally in interpretation, but one of the things was that the Whitney's audience per se, the people that the evaluators talked to, did not at that time want to use their own devices in the museum. And that was just something really surprising, because we thought that, everybody, they've got these, new gadgets, and they'd want to sort of try them out. So partially for that reason, we kind of held back a little bit on upgrading to multimedia. We did a very interesting study last year for our biennial guide and found out all kinds of information, interesting stuff that I think really has begun and will continue to kind of hone our practice for this. The types of content that people want. They want a lot of interactivity. Kids don't necessarily want a separate kids tour, but just sort of sophisticated information that they can access. The tone of voice, who is narrating is really important. Just all these sort of fascinating things that came up. They want really short videos. They say, if you want us to watch the videos, we come here for an art experience. And that was our biggest fear. It's like the heads up, heads down syndrome, that they would not be looking at the artwork, but they would be looking at the devices. We were wrong about that. They really want to look at the artwork, and they want the content on the device to sort of enhance their experience rather than kind of remove them from it. So something they said specifically about video was they've got to be short. They can't be talking heads. You've really got to engage us in some interesting ways, So that's sort of one of our challenges, and to add some bells and whistles that make the app much more interactive, and all the expensive parts. We really need to focus on how to add the social media and make the app much more engaging for our visitors. So those were the two interesting evaluations that we've done.
Really fascinating, and thank you for doing that, because it's going to be helpful for everybody working in this area. I was just wondering, with the bells and whistles that you mentioned, which ones do you have in mind that you think will be most effective in responding to these desires on the part of your visitors?
I think gaming is one of those, perhaps, and not, I think if we can come up with something really simple but really effective, like magic tape ball or tape trump, something like that, that people can play not just in the museum but also before, after their visit as well, that will sort of engage our audiences beyond the museum's walls and keep them coming back, when there's new content. It would be kind of fascinating to be able to sort of add new content to a game as well, sort of swap it out as the exhibition changes, so that the game actually kind of morphs with what's actually happening at the museum. And there's a real sort of connection between what's happening there and then outside of the museum as well. So bringing the museum into people's lives and homes, as well as having them engaged while they're visiting the physical building.
Would you say that up until this point, your mobile content and apps have been primarily designed for visitors, physical visitors to the museum building, or are you also always thinking about the off-site audience too?
We're always thinking about the off-site audience, and I know, for example, our lecturers and people sort of involved with the museum, they'll download or go online and listen to the audio, and we get messages from people in Singapore and other places in the world that say, oh, thank you for putting your audio online. because when I come home from work every day, I listen to one, and it's fascinating. You know, we have the image there, and those people will never sort of, or almost probably never come to the Whitney, and yet they're really sort of thankful and getting something from our content. So I would say it's kind of, it's worth having some of this in all different places, so that people you might not imagine would access it, you know. So yeah, I mean, we always have it on our website as well. So the audio and videos will be there. They're just not packaged as neatly as in the sort of one application.
Right. Great. Well, thank you so much again.
Welcome.
Any final burning questions? We'll let you go. You've been so generous with your time, and thank you very, very much.
We've got one more minute. Social media, and this is a huge sort of big question, but how can people interact and respond so that it's not just the authoritative voice of the museum, but people really contributing and engaged in the museum content as well? So we're not just sort of pushing stuff at our audiences, we're actually inviting them to participate as well. That's it. It's 5 o'clock.
Yeah, we struggle with that question too, but maybe together we'll come up with some good solutions.
Yeah, terrific.
Okay, thank you again. Really appreciate it.
Oh, great to meet you all, at least on a screen, and
hopefully in person
someday. Come visit the Whitney and take our guide.
Oh, we will.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Bye.